Greetings, I'm Professor K, and in this short video presentation, we're going to be taking a look at network cabling. Depending on what area of networking that you decide to work in, that is what is going to determine what type of networking cable you're most likely to be coming in contact with. Now, network wiring itself is a specialty. That's not to say you'll never have to pull a wire through a wall or through a ceiling, but generally we leave wiring of buildings up to the professionals who specialize in network wiring. 99% of us are going to come in contact with Cat 5, Cat 6 type cabling, and they're going to come in two different types. You're going to have unshielded twisted pair and shielded twisted pair. And now we're going to look at the pros and cons of each. Most of us are probably already familiar with Cat 6 unshielded twisted pair. You probably have it connected from your wall to your modem or to your access point. It could also be a Cat 5. Now, the difference between most of what you're talking about when it comes to this type of cabling is this little divider for the Cat 6 unshielded twisted pair. This divider here is designed to prevent or reduce the amount of crosstalk that the cabling can have if they get too close to each other. As a networking generalist, this is probably going to be the cable you're most often going to come in contact with. Now, your Cat 5 and your Cat 6 variety of cabling, if you'd removed the protective shield, inside you would find 8 color-coded wires broken down into 4 separate pairs. This color coding is what we use when it comes time for us to decide what type of cable we want to create, either a straight through cable or a crossover cable. Now, shielded twisted pair is a much stiffer wire type. It is hard to bend, and if you bend it too much, you can break it. It has protective shielding inside of the wire to protect it from electromagnetic interference. The wires themselves, the pairs, are actually covered in a protective shield, and then there is a outside overall steel braid that again protects all the wires from any type of electromagnetic interference. And then, of course, you have the flexible PVC jacket on the outside. This type of wiring is used when we're going to be coming in contact with electrical circuits, electrical appliances, overhead lighting, whatever it is that might be interfering with the communication signals in the wire. We want to try to prevent that from happening, and that's why this wire is usually used in the overheads when you're talking about fluorescent lighting or you're talking about electrical conduit. So let's take a look at the pros and cons of untwisted pair as compared to shielded twisted pair. For unshielded twisted pair, this cable is made up of twisted wires. It's cheaper than the shielded twisted pair. It does not need to have a grounding cable, and it does contain a lot of crosstalk. The shielded twisted pair, on the other hand, it is protected with a foil or mesh shield. STP is more expensive than our UDP. Shielded twisted pair also requires the use of a grounding cable. Shielded twisted pair has very little crosstalk. Now, the most common type of Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable that you're going to come in contact with is going to be the straight through. This is what you're going to use to connect the device, whether it be a printer or a computer, whatever that device is that needs to communicate on the network. You would use a straight through to add that device to the network. So when you connect two devices of different types together, again, you use a straight through cable. When you want to connect similar devices, let's say computer to computer, router to router, or you want to configure the router with a laptop or a PC, well, then you have to use what's called a crossover cable. This chart again explains which cable you would use depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So a hub to a hub needs a crossover. A switch to a switch needs a crossover. A switch to a router, well, that would be two different devices, so that would be a straight through. And a switch to a workstation, well, that is also two different devices, so that would be a straight through. In this diagram, you can see how the color-coded wires inside of the cable itself have been arranged to create a certain type of Cat5 or a Cat6 cable. In this instance, we're looking at a straight-through cable. The wires inside of the cable must be arranged in a certain order for you to have a straight-through and or a crossover cable. What you're looking at here is called an RJ45 connector. Notice that the tab is at the bottom. This will put the slot designated as number 1 on the RJ45 adapter all the way over to your left. For a straight through, both ends of the cable are configured the same. Now for a crossover cable, where you want to connect similar devices together, or you want to configure a router using the console port from your laptop or your PC, well, that crossover cable has one end of it configured as a straight through, and then the other end is configured a little differently. The wires on the crossover end are arranged in a different order. Regardless if the wire is straight through or crossover, how we configure the wires themselves inside of the RJ45 adapter is based on an industry standard. If you need a wiring diagram for a certain type of industry standard, they are readily available on the internet. In this chart, we get to see what type of cabling you would use for a specific type of job or for a building. So you go down here through the chart and you can see what the standards are or the metrics are for each wire type. Now this information that you're looking at is also testable. So if you're thinking about taking a certification exam for the A+, the Networking Plus, or any of the pluses, then you may be asked questions about cabling. As we see in this chart, this is the information that you would probably see on a certification exam. This is the type of question material that you would probably be asked about. They would ask you about Cat5 or Cat6 cabling. What's the maximum distance? What's the maximum speed? What type of adapter do you use? They might give you a scenario. Read the following scenario. What type of networking cable would you recommend for this particular job? Now, unless you're working for a telecom or you're working for a data center, you probably won't come in contact with a Cat7 or a Cat8 cable. Those are specialized cabling and they're designed for telecoms and data centers. The following image depicts how the wiring inside of each cable is arranged and whether or not it has a shield. Again, a cable is going to be specific to the job at hand. So if I'm wiring a home network, I'm not going to be worried about Cat7 or Cat8. I'm going to be worried about Cat6 probably. I can use a Cat5 cable. But for physically attaching devices to the network and using the correct Ethernet cable type, you're probably going to be using Cat6. And so that's going to conclude this short presentation on network cabling. If you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out, contact your instructor, and I'll see you in my next video.